What's up, Scyushi Squad? We back in some more Trove, and today we're going to be doing an updated video to the Vanguardian class tutorial. So, honestly speaking, not much has changed since the last year. So, all of my older class tutorial videos, though a lot of you guys and gals keep yelling at me, do an update to this class, do an updated video for this class. Honestly speaking, the same rules apply. You know, the characters are all still going to end up being built the same, outside of maybe a couple things that are going to be slightly different. Namely, now that we have the delves, we can end up getting not only Crystal 4 gear, but there is a whole breadth of new allies that you can end up using that are basically going to end up replacing the normal allies that we would be using in my 2019 tutorials. Except these allies are literally the same as some of the strongest allies in the game. They just have a light stat value to them, which makes them stronger, right? Because light is pretty much like one of the most important stats for end game. So anyways, oh, also, I completely forgot to mention this, but if you guys are new to Trove, you can use that sign up link that's down in the description, and then anything you end up buying out of the cash shop, I'll end up making a percentage of that sale. It's an awesome way that you can support me by literally just playing the game. It doesn't increase the price of anything. Thanks GameAgo for the opportunity, and thanks you find people watching at home who have actually done that, because it has made a huge impact on my life. It helps me pay the bills and stuff, and it's overall awesome, right? Because we're all just playing this game anyways. The way that you're going to end up building the Vanguard is literally a DPS character, so that's damage per second, just damage character. There's basically two different builds in the entire game of Trove. There's going to be DPS, and there's tanks. I have another video that already talks about all that stuff. Generally speaking, though, most of the characters are going to be built towards damage. I'll explain kind of how you're going to play this character for like the mid tier and to the end game and stuff like that, because I pretty much end up using the Vanguard exclusively for when I'm doing dungeon grinding and stuff like that. I don't really use him for delves, just because honestly speaking I can't really recommend him for that. And that's going to be our top suggestions, or that's going to be our main topics today, let me say it that way. Just because Trove's end game basically boils down to delves and dungeon grinding. And with dungeon grinding, you gotta be fast. You want to be able to go as quickly as possible. Whereas with delves, you want to have the raw damage as much as possible. And certain classes in the game just aren't going to cut it. But we're talking about the Vanguard today. So the Vanguard's strength is going to end up being speed. So if I just hop into just a U10 geode surface here while I give you guys an example of the stats that you're going to be going for on all of your gems and blah, 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 blah. Basically, the reason why I like to use a Vanguard is because he's not going to end up being as fast as the Neo Ninja for dungeon grinding and stuff like that. But if we end up just tagging an enemy and triggering that proc of our Raptor Berserker, well, we're not using Raptor Berserker, we're using the animated jug, which is basically the exact same thing as the Raptor Berserker, but it has a light value to it. We tag an enemy, it gives us a movement speed boost. We just got Pyro Disc. We use our number 1, which gives us even more movement speed, and as you can see, we can end up doing pretty speedy stuff with this guy. He's not the fastest, again. It's just the fact that I don't have to backpedal and do backflips constantly with the Neo Ninja. But I mean, hey, that's just my own personal taste towards it. That's why I like using Vanguard. But a couple things to note is that the third attack of the Vanguard's melee attack is going to end up being the uppercut. That's going to end up doing the most damage for you. It is also going to end up, once you have your classroom ability, reducing the cooldown of your other abilities. So you are basically going to try and uppercut enemies as much as you can, just for the simple fact that you want to be triggering your number 1 ability as often as possible. You can end up using, like I said, the animated jug, just because it's going to give you that increased movement speed. But if you're finding that you don't really care as much about movement speed, you want to actually have a little bit more survivability, the rule of thumb with Trove is by killing enemies faster, you are surviving for longer. I know that that doesn't make that much sense, but basically any of the enemies at the end game are going to end up, they'll one-shot you. Pretty much. There's no way around it. Even if you have like millions of health, you got to have like a lot of health in order to have enemies not even one-shot you. And even then, it's just not really worthwhile to end up going for it. This is why most characters are built towards being DPS. The point being, if you kill the enemies faster, it means that you're taking less damage. You follow me? So anyways, the other ally that you can end up using instead of the animated jug, let me see which one this actually is. I know I have it favorited. Jingles, yeah, that's the other one. So this one's basically going to be the same as the chromatic cubesly for so long of many years that we've played this game. Basically, it is going to end up giving us the stats that you can see. It increases our cooldown recovery or decreases cooldown. I don't know why they ended up renaming it to that. It just didn't make any sense to me compared to any other game. But the point is that by using this, you'll be able to use your abilities a lot more, and that can end up giving you a little bit more survivability. Most of all, just because you'll be able to spam your number 1 a lot more and just run around and just kind of be speedy and avoid things, right? So we'll get into the raw stat numbers in a moment. I always like using Death Defying just because of the fact that I always get one shot, and I'm also kind of lazy with the way that I grind. An alternative, though, is you can use the Conjurer's Crucible Vial if you have enough Magic Find, just because basically you have a chance of recovering a flask every time you end up triggering Magic Find. So if you have a high enough Magic Find count, you can end up recovering 1 flask per dungeon, and generally speaking, shouldn't be using more than 1 flask per dungeon, so long as you end up spamming it enough to end up healing out. There's a couple other options that you can do, but that's just my go-tos. Generally speaking, though, I just use Death Defying for absolutely everything. For your emblems, you're going to want to focus on using Martial Emblem as much as possible. If you're dying, you can pair that with Unyielding Emblem if you have it. What you will eventually end up doing, though, once you're not as worried about dying and just generally worried about speed, and you end up having enough damage that you can sacrifice the Martial Emblem. You can also use Sure Strike as another emblem, by the way. But eventually you're going to swap it all off to using the Chromatic Emblem so that you can use a pot to end up resetting some of your cooldowns, and then you can end up, you know, popping your number 1 again, because that's the whole thing, is you're going to want to use that ability pretty much as possible just to be as speedy as possible. And then, of course, Trailblazing. Trailblazing is kind of the big end game emblem that you're going to be using, just because at the end game, if you're dungeon grinding, again, you want to be fast. That is the key thing that you're trying to do here. As for a ring, I like to have a ring that has energy regen, just because you will run out of energy pretty darn fast, just because you're going to be very reliant on your right click, because that's just going to be the brunt of your damage. It basically does a big cone in front of you that'll just destroy everything. As for a banner, I mean, go for whatever you can. I like to use the Nitro banner just because when I'm farming in Geode Surface, sometimes I go for Nitro, and also it gives you an extra 10 movement speed, which is really nice. Otherwise, it's not really that important what banners you end up using, unless you end up having the torches from the Leviathans. That's going to end up being your best bet for just having an extra bit of raw damage, so you can go for that if you want. As for your crystal gear, or just your gear in general, the stats that you're going to want to be going for is movement speed and attack speed. Again, you can swap those out for crit hit and crit damage while you need it, but eventually the goal is you're going to want to have as much attack speed, because the character's attack speed is going to affect how quickly you defeat enemies, which means that you'll survive a lot longer, and you're going to want to have that extra movement speed, because movement speed is key to this character. Like, if I didn't even use the proper example earlier where you tag an enemy, we ended up getting our little ally to end up triggering our movement, but I also want to get Pyro Disc if I can, because then we can use a number 1 and we can pop a flask to trigger that Trailblazing, and then this is more our top speed, which I think our little ally buff ended up running out. No, it didn't. That buff actually lasts a long time. Anyways, that's what you're going to be going for that. Now let's talk about the raw numbers, the stats, and then we'll end up getting into the gems. So the stats that you're going to be going for is physical damage. You want to have, I don't know, you want to have the base at least 80k and up. Anything above that means that you should be mid to end game. Your crit damage, which, you know, there's only going to be 3 different stats you're going to be focused on here. Your crit damage, you want to get to maybe 800%, and then over that is going to end up obviously being better. And then of course you want to make darn sure that you have your crit hit at 100%, which you can see I have it at 99.4, which close enough, right? That's the important thing, is you always want, as the end game arises, get your characters to have as close to, if not 100% crit hit. There is no reason to go over 100%, because in a game like Trove, the percentage of your crit hit quite literally is the percentage of your crit hit. So if you have 100% crit hit, it means you're doing 100% crits. Other games deal with the math a little bit differently, and that's why, you know, in Trove it's so important to end up getting it. But anything further than 80k physical damage and 800 crit damage, as you can see, you know, I'd recommend maybe your physical damage at same as mine or somewhere around there. I got 150k base and then 100 or 1.8k for the crit damage percent, which you can kind of change a few things with your stats that will be more optimal, but honestly speaking, I'm already doing enough damage in U10 with my Vanguard that it doesn't really matter that much anyways. And even then, the more optimal damage is only going to be a very, very small amount, so it doesn't really matter. And then for your light value, I mean, that's as much as you can. That's going to be a very, very important stat to end up working towards. But let me hop into the club world here so that I can end up showing you guys the rolls that I have on my gems. I'm not going to talk about how you'll end up rolling these gems just because I already got other videos that talk about, you know, gems in general, or in general, ha ha ha, please subscribe. Vampiric Vanquisher, why am I using this one? I mean, I guess it's okay. Yeah, because it increases movement speed, so that's why I like to use that one. I'm used to using the Berserk Battler just because it gives us more raw damage, but yeah, that's true. I don't really need that one when I'm on the Vanguard, so I don't know what I'm thinking. But go for the Vampire one if you can. It will give you some leech of health, so it gives you more survivability, but also just because it has the chance of increasing your movement speed, as you can see. The stats that you want on all of your Cosmic Gems are going to be 3 pearls into light. Ouch, I know that's very painful to do. And then otherwise, physical damage and crit damage, every one of your light gems or cosmic gems are going to end up doing that, so just stick with that. Your empowered gems, it doesn't really matter so much what all of these are, but you do want to have your class gem ability and pyro disc. I just have Spirit Surge just because it's the only other one that I have. And then you're going to be doing a well, you're going to be doing a 3 by 3 ratio? No, it's a 6 by 3 ratio, right? Because you want to have all of your empowered gems have 2 pearls in physical, 1 in crit damage. Every single one of your empowered gems is going to end up doing that. And then when you get to the baby gems, 3 of them are going to end up having the same stats. And then another 3, the other 3 gems, you want to actually have 2 pearls in crit damage, 1 in physical. And then again, you're going to have crit hit on all of your empowered gems, all of your lesser gems, until you don't need it anymore. And then you can actually roll that crit hit out for more max health if you want, just because there's not much reason to end up having more than 100% crit hit, like I had explained, right? So yeah, hopefully that ends up actually helping you guys out and letting you guys know how to build the character, because I think that pretty much covers it. I hope I didn't end up missing anything. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want, support the channel, and have yourselves a fantastic day. Sign on and stay epic, gamers.